Tonight in our class of the 13 C's of Successful Christian Living, we're looking at a life of confidence. Confidence is basically an essential characteristic for people in general, and especially for Christians. Tonight we're going to look at what confidence is, some things that it is not, and how do we get it. So the fact that it's on here, as Christians, we need to be able to develop a sense of confidence and, in ourselves and God and our brothers and sisters and, things that we can rely on. And it's a trait that we can nurture, like most of the ones that are going to be talked about in this lesson, or this series of lessons. Now, public service announcement. If you're interested in teaching an adult Bible class, we are interested in growing our pool of adult Bible class teachers. And in the short term, the series of topics that we're going to talk about on Wednesday night for the next 6 months, which are basic Christian themes and topics, are things that I feel very comfortable with handing a class of this off to somebody else and let you work through the process and then get up here and teach the material. I am willing to provide as much or as little support as you feel that you need at this particular point, just to get some people used to the idea of, I can teach a class. You will learn confidence. In the long term, we're planning to offer a series of classes on teaching Bible classes in general, some of the techniques and, all of that kind of thing that goes into this. There is a process to this, and it can be learned. And you might find out, number one, that you're good at it, and then number two will be the big surprise, you actually enjoy it. So keep that in mind. If you'd like to take a shot at it, talk to me, and we'll get you hooked up with something. Okay, last week we looked at commitment. And commitment was defined as doing what we promise, the act of being obligated based on a relationship or a principle, or the act of committing to a charge or a trust. Those all came out in the English definition of the word. Many aspects of life require commitment. Getting married, that's commitment. Having children, that's a commitment. Getting a job, that's a commitment. Being a Christian, that's a commitment. And there are other aspects of that. But we choose to make a commitment because it offers a purpose, a hope, or a desired outcome. At least one of those elements is part of every commitment that we make. And the really important ones, all three of them are present in that. And last week I went so far as to say, if there's something that doesn't offer any of these, a purpose, a hope, or expected outcome, then it really doesn't require or deserve a commitment. You're not investing anything in it to do it, so why would you even bother? Commitment is a choice that we make. You can be forced to do something against your will. That's not a commitment. That's on somebody else's, for that. A commitment is something that we choose to become involved in. It also measures our integrity. How good is our word? If two people are talking about you as somebody that said, well, he or she said that they would do that, one possible answer is, well, then it's as good as done, or good luck with that. Depends on our integrity. It also requires trustworthiness. You're going to have to rely on somebody else to be good to their word. They have to be able to rely on you to be good about your word. Commitments require endurance. There's really hard to get excited about a commitment that's going to be done in 15 seconds. I don't know what that is, but that doesn't really ring like a commitment to me. Most of the things that we do, commitments involve months, weeks, years, time span. So it's going to require some endurance, some patience, some wisdom, some of these other characteristics to navigate that particular set of waters. And commitment comes with a reward. You agree to the commitment because there is an expectation that you're going to get something out of it, and you're going to put something in it, and whoever you're making the commitment with or to is basically expecting the same thing. So, any questions or comments before we get into our topic tonight? Confidence. The English definition of confidence, I found this in the Oxford Languages Dictionary. It's one of the ones I always go to, and I very seldom use it because I don't think it's very clear, but this time they nailed it. The feeling or belief that one can rely on someone or something, a firm trust. The state of feeling certain about the truth of something. A feeling of self-assurance arising from one's appreciation of one's own abilities or qualities. Number 3 is a whole lot of syllables that basically say you have some idea what you're doing and you can do it. Now, what I like about this definition of confidence is that as Christians, all 3 aspects of this definition apply to our confidence. The feeling or belief that we can rely on someone or something. Do we rely on somebody outside of ourselves as Christians? Yeah, God. The state of feeling certain about the truth of something. Do we rely on some statements that are found somewhere in written books and amongst our own personal experience to verify that we can have confidence in this? We study, we experience, we pray, we do these things, and then, cause, effect. We can see all of these kinds of things. And then finally, a feeling of self-assurance, basically that we know we can deliver. I can say this in the sense that we all know we're not perfect. But we can grow in it, and we don't have to do it alone, and so we can be confident that we can be useful in the service of Christ. Not perfect necessarily, but good. Really, really good is really, really good. So, the word confidence is found 45 times in the New American Standard Bible. It's found 16 times in the Old Testament and 29 times in the New Testament. I threw this in there because last week when we were talking about commitment, I had to mention that the word commitment is not found in any of the English Bibles that I referenced. Commit is, but not the commitment. In the New Testament, multiple Greek words are translated as confidence. Paul uses the word more than any other New Testament writer. But he does it in 2 ways, and he uses a different word or different words than what we're going to study tonight. But basically, I am confident that you will do what you say. So when he's writing to the Corinthian congregation about, gather this offering up that we're going to send back to Jerusalem, because I want to be confident that you're going to be ready, he's kind of chiding them a little bit, get on it, make sure that you're following through on this thing, because he wants to have confidence in their ability to do this. Or sometimes he will write and say, I'm here in this place or doing this thing because I want you to have confidence in my ability to serve as an apostle. That's not the word that we're looking for tonight. We're going to focus on a different Greek word, and it's found, it's found in these particular passages here that I've highlighted for you. This is Hebrews 4:16. It says, let us therefore draw near with confidence. The King James, New King James will have bold or boldly in there. To the throne of grace that we may receive mercy and may find grace and help in time of need. 1 John chapter 4:17. By this love is perfected with us, that we may have confidence in the day of judgment, because as he is, so also are we in this world. And then finally in 1 John 5:14, and this is the confidence which we have before him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. Now, all of those reflect that first definition, that we're trusting in somebody else, for what we need in this particular situation. We're trusting in God to deliver this for us. The Greek word that's translated confidence is parasius, and it means literally to speak freely. So how do you get from to speak freely to confidence? It's kind of an odd thought process, but it's an odd definition, but it actually does fit here. Generally, if we cannot speak freely, then there's something wrong either with the people we are talking to, whatever is being said, or why we are saying it, or possibly the circumstance that we are speaking in. So, and what do I mean by that? Well, the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights guarantees that we have freedom of speech, but it isn't as absolute as we sometimes want it to be. I am free to express a political opinion. I'm free to talk about a lot of different topics, but there are certain things I'm not free to do, allowed to speak freely to do. I can't accuse you of random crimes. You know, that comes with a legal consequence. I can't slander somebody. That comes with a legal consequence. There are places historically where that's not been possible to speak freely, even to the degree of expressing your political opinion. And then another circumstance that we could do is maybe say something harmful to somebody, perhaps even thoughtlessly. It's a whole lot better not to say that harmful thing and damage the relationship than have to go to all the work of restoring your reputation in this regard. Don't let it out. That's not a really good thing to speak freely about. Another way that we could speak freely and harm somebody else is, I could tell somebody something truthful about somebody else and do it with the idea that, you know what, they like to gossip. I can get this out there just by telling this one person, and then it's just out there in the world, and my job here is done. Don't speak freely about stuff like that or things like that. In the worst case, speaking freely in the wrong situation can get one into trouble. Classic historical example, if a nation is being governed by a tyrant or a dictator, you better not say anything even slightly bad about the tyrant or the dictator. In the 1930s, in the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin was the tyrant in charge of that country. And he set up a policy. He told his secret police, you guys got to come up with a quota of enemies of the state. People who don't like me, don't like the Soviet Union or something like that. Saying something thoughtlessly under those circumstances could have gotten you killed. I can name right off the top of my head 5 nations on this earth today that you cannot speak freely in like that, because it will get you in prison or killed. So it's nothing new in that regard. So speaking freely, you have to basically have confidence that what you're saying is worth listening to, that who you're saying it to can be trusted with the information, and that it serves a purpose, a legitimate purpose. That's speaking freely. You can be confident in that situation. You know, if all of those things are true, that's an appropriate thing to do. So that's why I think it's related to this idea of speaking freely. If you're not confident in who you're talking to or what you're talking about or something like that, you're not going to speak freely. If you are, then you will. And so confidence in God kind of implies the ability to speak freely to God. Signs of a lack of confidence. These are some emotional responses that often show up when we lack confidence. Fear, insecurity, doubt, untrustworthiness or unworthiness, self-consciousness, failure, discouragement, pessimistic or negative outlook about ourselves, doubting God's love, providence, and care for us, frustration, and unhappiness. When we lack confidence in our relationship with God, usually some of these things are manifest in our lack of confidence. Now, kind of a funny thing about that, a lack of confidence in yourself doesn't necessarily cause any of these things. There are other things that can do that. You can be having a really bad day and it feels like the whole world has just dumped it all on your shoulders and you can't cope with it. That can be a struggle. Mental health problems can be a struggle. Relationship difficulties can be a struggle. And a host of other things can cause us to feel this way, but it also impacts our confidence. If the world's dumping on you today, how confident are you going to be feeling about doing anything? So it does impact our image in that way, kind of the old vicious circle kind of a thing. When we lack confidence, we do this. When we do this, we lack confidence. Questions or comments? Now, characteristics of confidence. First of all, I want to emphasize there is a big difference between confidence and arrogance. I point this out because sometimes when somebody is confident in an area that we're not, it's not in our skill set or something like that, we kind of may want to ascribe to them as being a little bit arrogant about this, and that's not really what the intent is there. Arrogance is a sense of self-promotion or an unjust pride. in ourselves and a desire to be at the center of attention. Confidence is just basically, I can do this, and I know I can do this, and I'll deliver. You know? Now, another aspect about confidence is we don't have confidence in everything. So real confidence is the idea of I know what I know, and I know what I can do, and I know what I can't. I've used this illustration before, but I like it. I've done a lot of electrical wiring in my house. Put it in there, it looks good. I will not attach it to the circuit panel. I hire an electrician to come in and do that, because people who do that and don't know what they're doing can fry themselves. Not real optimistic about that. Probably could learn the skill, but I don't do it often enough to practice it. So I know what I know. I can do this part. This part I'm going to get somebody else to do for me. Second point, one is not born with confidence. It is developed over time. People who think that they're confident in all circumstances might need to go back and look at, in the mirror a little bit, because you don't have all of the talents and all of the skills in that situation that you think you do. And if you misapply your confidence in some situations, you're going to get yourself hurt. Don't plug the wire into the circuit panel. To have confidence requires knowledge, experience, and effort. Now, the fact that we're talking about those three characteristics generally suggests two things. Number one, it occurs over time. Number two, that sounds an awful lot like a commitment, doesn't it? Why would you go to all the trouble to develop a skill in a particular area, and then, to the point that you're confident in it? Well, it has a purpose, it has a hope, and it generally has some reward that's going to go along with it once you have successfully done that. This is why we get high school degrees or technical certificates or go to college or all of these other types of things. We're investing something in acquiring this set of skills that we think will be beneficial for us in the long term. We do that as Christians, don't we? We need knowledge, don't we? Where do we go to get that? Go to the Bible. We go to classes and to discuss the Bible with each other and gather insights and maybe a little bit of encouragement, things like that. We work together on this and we grow in this. Experience is also a great teacher. Have you had to deal with a situation that you found uncomfortable or unpleasant or challenging or something like that and figured out how to pull it off? Yeah, everybody, you should have at this age, you should have done that several times now, And if you haven't, don't talk to me, because I'll be depressed. We can do this. The effort, we know some idea about the effort that it takes to be successful in this. That's a commitment. So investing and acquiring this knowledge, I already said that, but this will produce a proper confidence over time, because we've worked at it, we've acquired the skill, and it will be, personally rewarding to us in that regard, and possibly even financially rewarding, depending upon the skill that we've acquired. Questions or comments?
John,
Yes.
I think all that adds up to wisdom as well.
Yes, it does. Wisdom. He said all of that adds up to wisdom. And in fact, if you're going to embark on this knowledge, experience, and effort journey, wisdom is a key thing to pray for. So you understand how this all fits together. And generally speaking, once we've gone through it, we actually do understand, this is how the process really works a lot better. Somebody else over here? Yeah, Anna?
Along with confidence, I think there's competence. As you do things, you gain competence, which gives you confidence.
Yes, that is exactly right. I mean, that's one of the reasons we practice. That's the experience part of it. The knowledge part's kind of like the theory part. This is how it's supposed to work, and then the experience part is the applying that and figuring all of that out. You develop the competence. That is correct. Competence is a product of confidence. Confidence is a product of competence. Ken?
Yeah, I was just thinking, the Greek word before that is meta, with confidence, that you approach the throne of God. And so you have confidence in both yourself, and the confidence in yourself isn't that I'm going before the throne of God and I'm as great as He, like you said, not arrogance.
Yeah.
But you do have that confidence in yourself, and that you can pour your heart out, because God already knows the things things that you have done wrong.
Yeah.
And you can have confidence in yourself and that you have that desire
Yeah.
to correct those
Yeah.
things that are not right. And you can have confidence in God knowing that He is a forgiving, loving Father and wants you to be in His family.
Yeah, I studied that, and I kind of edited it out because I was afraid I was going to run out of time, but now we got to talk about it. In Hebrews 4:16, let us therefore draw near with confidence, is literally in the Greek meta confidence. And what that meta does on there means it's part of Facebook now? No, it's not. That's what it means in the Greek is that in the midst or among. So let us draw near in the midst of confidence or among confidence or abundant confidence. So this is like confidence supersized in this, to the throne of grace that we may receive mercy and may find grace and the help of the time of need. Now, you know, in one sense, that sounds almost kind of cheeky, doesn't it? But that's what the Hebrew writer, probably Paul, was saying there. Be in the midst of confidence when you come to this particular point. So thank you for bringing that up. Now I had an excuse to use it. All right. This is when confidence does affect our self-image here. Generally, people who lack confidence in everything usually suffer from a bit of low self-esteem, kind of the idea that I can't do anything right. If we overrate ourselves, we become arrogant, haughty, conceited, or even narcissistic. James 4:6, Romans 12:3 warn against that. That we need to humble ourselves here and not be so full of ourselves. If we underrate ourselves, we become fearful, ineffective, and have low self-esteem. And then, Timothy 1:7, we did not receive a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power. Revelations 21:8, people who are fearful or timid like that, there's a place in the lake of fire for them because they didn't overcome it. Generally speaking, self-esteem in a human being is formed by around the age of 7. And the thing that's the kind of the deciding factor, if a child is raised with 100% positive reinforcement, you are wonderful, you are beautiful, you are all creative, no child compares to you, they grow up to be little egomaniacs because they're not getting corrected for anything. Everything they do is perfect. And so mom and dad thought it, everybody else, you should think that too. If a child is raised in a household that's where they're always criticized, always corrected, and never acknowledged for having done anything correct, then they typically have low self-esteem. And both of these lead to different outcomes. Both of them are bad outcomes. The low self-esteem, that's the person who thinks, I'm not worth anything. I'm no good to nobody for anything or any purpose whatsoever. High self-esteem, you guys should be glad to be in my presence because I am so wonderful. Everybody acknowledges this. Why don't you? Those are not good extremes. God wants us to have a proper self-outlook. That's really the essence of humility right there. It's not that I abase myself or anything like that. It's that we learn to see ourselves the way God sees us. What does He see? He sees a soul He loves. He sees a lot of potential there. He's not blind to our faults or our weaknesses or anything like that, but He's got a plan to kind of work us through these things. And He's always going to be there for us because we are valued. So do that for yourself. You do need correction, but you need encouragement. You have value. And that's why Christ died for us. So that's more of a balanced self-outlook. Confidence affects this one way or the other. Especially if you're basing probably more so if you're basing yourself on merit and you actually acquire some skills that are useful in something, then now I'm valuable because I have merit. But that's not entirely correct either. All right, dealing with failure and disappointment. Efforts to grow in knowledge, experience, and effort will not always be successful. One of the things about this that I haven't really emphasized, and I will now, there is a time element involved in this. When you started school back as a child, most people started out in kindergarten and you go 12 years of schooling, elementary, middle, high school. and then at the end, you get a diploma. Anytime you add the element of time to any process, you're opening the door for failure. At some point, you're just not going to do it right. And so you didn't do all of your schoolwork right. You didn't do soccer right. You didn't do your job right or something like that. Always a possibility for failure and disappointment. We sin. We make mistakes. Now, when I first wrote this down there, I wrote, we make mistakes, but then I realized a lot of people are using that for a euphemism of sin, and they're not entirely the same thing. So we sin, that's a moral issue. That's a character issue. Mistakes can happen, or from ignorance or something like that. We become frustrated by failure, and sometimes we behave rather poorly as a result. Have you ever had one of those really bad days and come home and taken it out on one of your family members? I wasn't talking about today. Now, yeah, most of us can make it through a day or two, but I mean, we've all done something like that. And then, after you've realized, well, they didn't deserve this, the kids didn't deserve this, the spouse didn't deserve this, the postman didn't deserve this, you kind of have to circle back around and apologize. We've all done that. And sometimes failure is not even our fault. Circumstances beyond our control can hinder our efforts. Somebody gets sick, you get sick, somebody loses a job. I mean, I've had that experience. I walked into work one morning, employed, and by 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was unemployed. And I didn't even see it coming. I had no clue that this was coming. A bit of a setback there. So you kind of understand that how that works there. So circumstances beyond our control can hinder our efforts. You reprioritize in that type of a situation when you lose a job. Suddenly, things that were very, very important at, 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock that morning, not so much 5 o'clock that afternoon. Whole new priority set going on there. So the challenge then is how to accept failure, learn from it, and get past it. So the bottom line is you are going to fail. We are going to fail. And we're going to have to deal with it. A strategy for dealing with failure is kind of important in this situation. Some of us don't handle it well. I hate it. I hate doing something like that, at least in a moral sense, on the job and stuff like that. I don't worry about it. You can always write the code differently next time. But I don't like that. And I know there are a few other people and that are like that as well. So basically, you have to forgive yourself and focus on others. Bear one another's burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ. So you're feeling a little bit down, somebody else need your help. I think one of the gifts of service to others is it pulls the focus off ourselves. And it puts it on somebody who actually needs the help. And then it usually throws in a good heap and help in a relationship, better relationship out of that. You've acquired a friend, you've understood somebody better, they understand you better, and you got an ally to walk through this life. And that's part of the reason why we have a congregation, and part of the reason that we should be investing in it is to bear one another's burden, to develop these types of relationships. That's a good thing. 1 Peter 5, 6, and 7, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your anxiety upon him because he cares for you. I highlighted verse 7. Why do you think I did that? You have an anxiety about failure or something like that? Let him deal with it. Let him deal with it, and you focus on getting over the thing. Now, there are other reasons that, that anxiety can happen with, mental health or something like that. Work with it. If you need extra help on it, that's fine. But ultimately, let God bear this burden for you. That's what he's, one of the things he's wanting to do for us. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So, verse 2, consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. I think the first time I read that passage or tried to study it, I thought, what in the world is wrong with you, James? You know, how do you get something painful and link that to joy? Well, it turns out that this often has a purpose. I can speak from my own professional career that the times of the greatest development in my job skills came from dealing with the most difficult of problems. I think my record was I spent 6 weeks trying to find one bug in code that wasn't even my code, but I knew it was there. And because of what I had to go through and all of that kind of stuff, it took me 6 weeks to find that. I learned a lot out of that. I was a much better developer, you know, as a result of that. And you know, and that's, you know, sometimes relationship experience works that way. Some of the things I'm very cognizant about right now when dealing with other people is don't treat them this way. Why don't I treat them that way? Because I did it before and it didn't work so good. So I learned, don't do this. Now I may find another mistake or something like that to deal with it, but don't do this because that definitely doesn't work. So it can be useful in that regard as well. So burdens, trials, and problems can be a blessing from God. It's part of the human makeup. It's part of the human condition. We got to learn to deal with it. And the lessons that we learn from these events can be the bridges to greater things. Part of the experience that we have, part of the confidence that we have comes from the experience of having to deal with these situations. And one of the ways we share that is maybe I didn't have to deal with this situation, but somebody else has, and you've got some insight into that, and you can share that with me. Or maybe I've dealt with this and you haven't. Same thing going the other way as well. So pray for strength and courage. You're going to need that to get through this anyway. And when you throw a failure in on top of it, that's really kind of like a curveball. Oh, by the way, that second point up there, the lessons learned from these events can be bridges to greater things. As older and more mature in my career, that used to be a selling point in every job interview that I had. I would tell the person I was interviewing, you know, you want to hire me because all of these silly mistakes deal with me. I never spoke freely to them in the sense of, now I'm on to the really expensive, you know, mistakes, you know, that you make these guys and you're going to bankrupt the company. I did not speak freely about those, just the ones that, you know, the ones that, the middle level mistakes, lower level mistakes, been there, done that. So remind ourselves of God's promises and love for us, and always, always, always remind ourselves that there's a reward. There is a reason why we are here doing this. We want to have confidence in that reward. I mean, this is part of the outcome that we're hoping to get. So, any other questions or comments or closing thoughts?
I do like to focus on the reward. Paul and Silas were suffering in prison, yet they were singing at midnight because they were focusing on the reward.
Yeah, I think, just as on a little personal note, that's the one thing I don't do enough of, is focusing on the reward. I tend to focus more on the short term, and you lose sight of why if you don't do that. Anything else? Appreciate your attention.